In probably 1981, Thanksgiving, I went to Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas for the first time to do a meeting for John Osteen to take care of all the kids at his Thanksgiving convention. And I wasn't prepared for what I came across. It was just remarkable. I have to say that of all the churches I'd ever been to, I had never had the sense of excitement and enthusiasm that I felt there at Lakewood. You just had this amazing sense of expectation. There were a lot of people from the outside to come in for the meeting, but there were also a significant number of church members. Another thing that surprised me was that the building was just a plain metal structure. Outwardly, it didn't look that great at all. It was very nice on the inside, seated about 2,500 people, did not have particularly comfortable chairs. In fact, I think they're pretty small, but it's quite the atmosphere. A number of us who went around that church during that season, we all compared notes and said, Lakewood Church has the same feel as a big ongoing tent revival, and that's the way it was. It was a church with the anointing of an evangelist on it, and there was a tremendous sense of excitement. Brother Osteen could have fallen into a trap very easily, a trap of his own making, had he wanted to. And that would have been to try and build a new building in a much nicer part of town, to raise money, to perhaps even borrow a lot of money to go build a building. And there wouldn't have been anything wrong with that, but he wouldn't do it. And all over the country, there were people that in his shoes would have done that very thing. Let's get to a better part of town. He didn't do that. He stayed right where he was. The part of town that he was in was very poor. Pretty dilapidated housing all up and down the street that you would drive to get to Lakewood Church. But Lakewood Church was an oasis, not just in the city of Houston, but to the world. And you had that feeling when you got there. I never forgot that. And one of the things that I learned from Brother Osteen is I continued to be around him as much as I possibly could. And in the evenings, after the services, I had the opportunity to go to the green room. There would always be a meal. The main speakers would be there. Brother Osteen, Dodie Osteen, his wife, wonderful lady. They were always there. And there'd be 10, 12, 14 people in the room. And I was just blown away at how low-key they were. And they weren't high-minded at all. They treated me with the highest honor. And that was not the case in a lot of the churches and conventions and camp meetings. I went to one particular camp meeting I did for 10 years. I never got invited to the green room one time. But I did from the very first time when I went to Brother Osteen's church. And they treated me like I was a regular guest speaker. So it was very, very encouraging to me because I wasn't used to getting that kind of treatment. But in being around him, I noticed this one thing. He stayed very down to earth. He never seemed to get in a hurry or allow himself to be put under pressure. And during that season, I heard him preach a message with this passage in it. And it stayed with me for years and years and years and years. Now, in those days, I was not as careful to mark things down and to record them like I would later on. So I lost the reference on this for over 30 years. And I asked the Lord to help me to find it. I thought it was an alternate translation of the King James. It wasn't. It was a little marginal reading in the King James Bible. And it's Genesis chapter 12 and verse 9. And it's how the Lord describes the movement of Abram when he first came into the land of Canaan. And it says, and Abram journeyed, traveling, and this is the margins part, traveling by easy stages toward the south, or the Negev. And Brother Osteen really focused on that. He said, our walk with God should be a season of, or a sequence of easy stages. In other words, we're not under constant pressure. We're not continually behind the eight ball, feeling a great deal of pressure to do this, to do that. And as I went on in ministry, I didn't always follow that advice. For instance, I did a kids' ministry magazine. It was a huge mistake. It was always an incredible expense. I think it cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000 a month to do it. And we never did see any kind of return revenue off that magazine. Had I not done that magazine, I think most all of my financial problems, there are a few other things I did that were a mistake, but most all of my early day financial problems would have gone away had I dropped that magazine. It just never produced anything. Now, the Gospel Bill Show, on the other hand, it was a tremendous blessing. It opened so many doors. The magazine didn't. The Gospel Bill Show brought in revenue, or gave me an opportunity to generate revenue, which the magazine did not. And so it was very practical to me to see the difference in these things. And I was a little bit of a slow learner, but eventually I dropped that magazine and got my ministry back on track financially. But the point that I want to make is, had I listened to Brother Osteen really carefully, and I did most of the time, but had I paid careful attention, I would have avoided that. He told me about a Bible school that was started in his own church. And they did it because several other people had done it. He thought maybe we needed to do that. So he launched this Bible school, and it became a real burden to the church. And he had a lot of guts, because in this first year of doing the Bible school, he realized this is not working, and it's producing a tremendous amount of strain on our schedules, on us. It's not happening in a flow. We're going to cut it. And so they cut the Bible school. I admire him for having the guts to do that, to admit we probably made a mistake here. And there are loads of churches that get into trouble, loads of ministries that get into trouble, not because they do something evil, but they do something that they're not really called to do. And where did you get it? Well, you didn't get it by going to a bar and looking at what goes on inside. You didn't get it by looking at some drug deal going on in your city. You got it by looking into another church or another ministry. The reason that I started my magazine is because every ministry that I followed had a magazine. But they were adult ministries, and the adults read those magazines, and they bought things with their credit cards, and they were partners. They gave. Children don't do that. And so in my mailing list of about 100,000 people, I had almost all children, maybe 10,000 adults sprinkled here and there. So when I would send out a fundraising letter, inevitably, I would send it out to a bunch of children. And it made a lot of people angry, because I asked people to support me, and I had no way of knowing if I'm talking to an adult or a child. And so I wound up sending letters to children, asking them for support for the Gospel Bill Show. Looking back on that, it was a huge mistake. But I got into that because I looked over at what my peers were doing and what my mentors were doing, how they all had magazines, and I thought, I've got to have a magazine to be successful. So this was a self-induced pressure, a pressure that I did not need to be under, and it was never really productive. And you can lie to yourself and tell yourself, if I drop this, who will do it? And you can have all these reasons why you think you have to continue. But I'm going to tell you this. Keep it simple. And if I learned anything from John Osteen at all, and I learned a bunch, but it was this. And he said it to me over and over again. Willie, keep it simple. Keep it simple. And when I followed that advice, it was amazing how much easier ministry was. I want to thank you for watching our podcast today. And if you really liked it, would you please give us a little thumbs up by clicking on that sign down below? And then I would encourage you to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our future podcasts, because they're all going to be good. And if you would like to support us financially, either with a one-time gift or recurring gift, you can do that by clicking on the link below or going to myfaithroots.com. Thank you so much for watching this program.